Greetings everyone, this is Rambling Collector here, and welcome back for another comic review. The subject of today's video, the comic graphic novel series Wist by Steve M. Robertson, a grimdark fantasy that I thoroughly enjoyed so much that I wound up finishing it within a day. So, to give a little backstory here before we begin, I actually stumbled upon this two-volume series when I was scrolling through TikTok at one point, and yes, for those of you who are curious, I do follow the book talk trend and whatnot. Believe me, it does not do me any good as a reader for myself, for my need for new books, as well as for my wallet. Though I do practice a lot of self-control, or at least try to. But when I stumbled upon this one, it was back when we were going through the TikTok shutdown a little while back, like at the beginning of this year. But I went ahead and ordered this series because I thought, you know what? This seems like something to really give a shot to. Especially for the fact that when I looked through it, it really gave me some very nice Berserk vibes by Kentaro Miura. And honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But remind me at some point to do a short showcasing all of the books I've picked up just from TikTok alone. Anyways, with that being said, let's get started with the video, shall we? So first and foremost, Wist as a whole provides a very unique grimdark setting where the gods of old have long since been wiped out, leaving only the hungry wish-granting god Thousand as the sole deity remaining. But our point of view character is not Thousand himself, rather it is from someone who is bound to his service, known as Wist, one of Thousand's bound angels. And I will say this much. Wist's duty as a bound angel of Thousand, aka a collared slave, makes him a very empathetic character, especially when more of his backstory is revealed further on and his hatred of gods further explained. Now you may be wondering, why exactly would someone who hates gods wind up working for a god, especially one as wicked and terrifying as Thousand? Because for Thousand, the way that he works as a wish-granting god is that he will hear the prayers of desperate people, calling for his name, making a wish for things such as great riches, the death of an enemy, or other certain wishes that people tend to make. Now Thousand will send his angels, quote-unquote, to answer their prayers, giving them all that they desire. However, as a result, the ones who make the prayer, the ones who make that wish, they wind up being sacrificed to Thousand to feed his ever-growing hunger. And yeah, it's very much as dark as you can imagine. Like, can you imagine if the god of our time demanded such a thing? Like when we make a prayer, it comes true and then immediately we are fed to them as a means of sustaining them? Yeah, pretty gruesome stuff. But I will say, despite being only 2 books long, it really pulls you in the further you go. And one of the major highlights I will say is I absolutely adore the dark pages. I'm pretty sure some of you have seen those types of books where it's like very nice black pages with white print writing. And yes, artistically they are amazing, but they're also a really good relief on the eyes, I would say, at least in my honest opinion. Because sometimes the sheer brightness of the page, especially when it's reflected at us from a bright light, it can be absolutely blinding for many a reader. So for those who want a more dark page type of book, Wist is definitely up your alley. But more so than that, the ending of book 2 leaves the reader in a sense that there is more to the story to come, really leaving us to question whether this series is completed or if there is more to tell. And if you really want some of the more major details that appear throughout this series, there is gods, there is monsters, there is witches and magic and plots, and a very grim setting that we see here with the absence of gods and how the world is deteriorating because of that. It's a sad thing to see, and it really makes the reader question whether gods are necessary or not in this particular sense, whether faith is a necessity. And in some cases, that can be the truth. Other times, though, the consequences towards humanity can be a very major blight in the face of these deities. It's a complex question we always need to ask ourselves. But, more than the story though, let's talk about the artwork for this series. So first and foremost, I believe I remember mentioning how this series gave off some very heavy Berserk vibes, and if you look at the artwork here, I'm fairly certain that you can agree with me. The artwork throughout all of its pages is fantastic. It really highlights just how dark this series truly is, how grim of a setting Wist as a story truly is. From the sheer volume of magic of lightning being cast down from a dark sky, a young girl being set on a dark throne as a supposed new god, and even Thousand himself being shrouded in shadows and mist, really lending the idea that this is a massive being still inhabiting the physical plane, swollen beyond reason from the various sacrifices that have fueled him. And Thousand alone makes for a very creepy character, especially when you can hear his hissing voice in your mind, and you imagine this slippery, sly thing, mutated beyond all belief, feasting on souls, countless others to sustain his hunger, and seeing him cast in these misty shadows really lends credence that this is an eldritch horror of a god. And overall, it really ends that nice fantasy horror bit to it as well. And I love comics that really go into the horror of their worlds, especially when it comes to a very dark fantasy such as Wist. Some of the great examples I have seen of this, when I look at their artwork, are things such as Black Company, as well as Berserk. Because like I mentioned before, this gives off some very heavy Berserk vibes, which honestly might inspire me to read the manga at some point. I really need to make time for that. First, I gotta dive through all the other books though first. So, keep encouraging me, ladies and gentlemen, I will get there eventually. But, with all this being said, I'm very certain you can come to the conclusion of what my overall score for this entire 2-book series is going to be. And if you guessed a solid 10 out of 10, you would be absolutely right. And, if you want to see the reasoning for this score, give the series a shot for yourself. There is an official website that you can pick it up from by Steve M. Robertson, or you can also buy the pack of it off of TikTok. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, this is a series that is definitely worth your time, especially if you want to support another fantastic indie creator, as well as if you're looking for a new dark fantasy to really scratch that itch that you've been looking for ever since reading Berserk. So, yeah, overall, Wist as a whole, a solid 10 out of 10 for me. A great story, amazing, well done artwork, and in all honesty, it really left me craving for more right after finishing it. I really am curious to see if the author will continue with this series or not, or if he'll just leave it on a cliffhanger ending. Mr. Robertson, if you are watching this, please let myself and the audience know. Will we be seeing more of this series in the future? Or is this all we will see of the world of Wist? Please, let us know. And for those of you watching, thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this video. It really means a lot to me that you all have stuck this far, listening to this crazy man rambling about comics, manga, and books, and whatever else. It really means a lot to me that you've stuck around to the end. And if you're curious to see some of the other books that I've covered on this channel, I will leave a link to the Indie Authors playlist. And if you are also curious to see some of the other comics that I've covered, I will leave a link to that playlist as well. Once again, thank you all for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off for now, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day, fellow readers.